Hello, dear hearts. It's Tashi Dos Santos here. Lovely to connect with you. This talk today will not exactly relate directly to the astrological teachings of the times we're in, but there will be an indirect theme, and I would like to link it up to Pluto in Aquarius and that lengthy 20 or so year transit, which is a generational shift, and educational, especially when it comes to equalising the masses, the construct of hierarchy falsely placed will be deconstructed. And as I was saying, during the Uranus transit in Taurus, the rich will become poor, the poor will become rich. Sudden, complete shifts that are 180 degree will be taking place and have indeed started to present themselves in the last 7-year period. But moving into the theme of Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini, which is again another 7 years from now, transiting through a sign where Uranus does feel comfortable, coupled with Neptune stabilizing later on in Aries, once again a very long transit, and as we support the entry of that shift, there's Saturn in Aries as well. So in saying this, the outer planets do have a lot of impact on the collective, on the whole. And it's not going to be a direct discussion about those, but as I said, indirect, so that we're able to understand, the cosmic influence, planetary influence, which isn't going to be happening again in our lifetimes. And again, highlighting Pluto in Aquarius with all I'm about to discuss does equalize, bring a sense of a very strict and stern, you could say, evener, with the Aquarian theme really ruling the collective, communities, the underprivileged, the communal voice, how societies are made up, friendships, the structures and concepts of belief systems that are taking place again in the masses, not in the individual positioning. And also looking at the realm of technology, definitely, and how that evolves, and Mother Nature's role in that versus the man-made understanding and how that's used. So, all I'm about to talk about comes from a recent personal mystical tour and journey to Niagara Falls with a dear and beloved sister and friend, Daria. And there were also other beloved sisters and friends who were doing a similar thing the day before we were there and the day after. So that was a great trifecta of a balancing of forces, of intentions, going towards the Niagara Falls on the full moon in Capricorn 2025 with this intention to see what's happening there, but offer and help and heal the land and set intention and connect with the right intention and just be very present with the Niagara Falls and the region. So having that sisterly support on the neighboring days was an amazing energetic field, and so many being willing to be there with wholehearted aspirations, just to connect with the blessing, which is the element water, and also everything that the landscape is prior to our, false education regarding what we're supposed to think the Niagara Falls are. And, this will take us into a journey linked to the Great Mother Goddess in the form of Gaia, Yi. This will take us into a journey of times long before, colonialism and what took place when there was a forced, conquering upon First Nations and original peoples of landscapes, even linked to places like Australia, New Zealand, the United States of America, Canada, and we can actually briefly touch on the United Kingdom, just so we can understand the origin of a lot of what has served this earth falsely. So the talk will get us into a sense of personal experience, also again connecting to Gaia, to Yi, Mother Earth, the Great Mother Goddess, learning about the Niagara Falls as a power place, as an important point of reference on this Earth map, even though she's supposedly, scientists have said, fairly new. So her creation, based on certain lakes melting, ice lakes melting, she was informed, her being, based on scientists' understanding, relatively new, still is much older and more ancient than any of us here right now in this body we're habitating in. So it's important to, I guess, through learning about all this, make our own conclusions, connect our own dots, reflect, contemplate. But be ready because, I'm sure there is a lot of information here that will be shared that will maybe have us questioning, what is fact, what is conspiracy, what is theory, what is, actual factual evidence that comes from so-called, you could say, stamped, approved researchers and so on. But yeah, I think all of you who are listening to this channel and are connecting with this information, I'm quite sure the majority of you really do care about the Earth's healing, our own original origins, the common question of why we're here, the path of remembering, recollection, understanding the greater purpose, what really matters, and above all healing, because it's an age that we're in right now that's in urgent need of healing, healing each other, healing the Earth, healing our own hearts, so that we can, be really capable of serving in the most highest and most authentic way. So, let's begin. So, dear hearts, I'll start this by asking all of us, why has there been such an interest across history, recent history, such an interest in eliminating the shamans of the earth, the witch doctors, the healers that use natural means to heal, those who carry lineages that are linked to Gaia, Mother Earth, such as the first peoples of different landscapes that have a very well proven presence in localities to landscapes for thousands and thousands of years, such as the Aborigines of Australia, the first peoples of all of the Pacific Ocean areas, such as New Zealand and neighbouring islands, the First Nations, the first peoples of Canada, what we know as Canada, and the native beings who had been very much living and dwelling in places like the United States of America long before certain colonists came. We can say the same for many places on this earth that, have a strong indigenous original people's presence, which had thousands and years, if not more, of a history of how to relate to the earth and how to naturally relate to the region. If we're looking at places like the Latin Americas and everything there and the different lineages and beings to locality that have definitely cared for and done so much for the earth, for the land, and understood its rhythm for so much longer than the so-called modern world, which is a very, very short time frame. Okay? So why has there been so much emphasis in recent history to shut down this magic which is, as my teacher would say, something that we use only to help people, only for the benefit. If it's not to benefit, it's not magic, which has stuck with me because that's the truth. The truth cannot depart once we hear it. All that capacity to help, to be in alignment with the beauty and the grace of this earth, to be in alignment with all the different species and creatures and beings and forms and dimensions of so much that dwells here. Why has there been such an emphasis on taking that down, on harnessing it, on using it, on exploiting it, on abusing it? That's the first question. please write it down. Please note it down, because you'll need to remember it as we go through this very, very in-depth discussion, which is inspired by, as I mentioned, recent travels, mystical tours with beloved Sister Daria to the Niagara Falls and certain spots in Ontario, Canada that needed assessment. And through that, this has been birthed, because I've never been there in my life, in this life, to Niagara Falls. I've never stood at the Niagara Falls before, looking at the USA's border. And I believe a town called Buffalo, from where I was standing, was the Ontario, Canada side. And just looking at that border point, the division point being the Niagara Falls, and all of this birthing into my mind, being carried for several days now in my heart, and really desperately needing to be released to all of you so it can be heard by everyone. But it is a very in-depth discussion, because it was the last piece to a very long journey of my own life on this earth, many, many decades of being here with all of you. And it was the last piece to a very long journey of a very important question. And that trip indeed completed a massive, massive, massive 360-degree travel and journey that brought me back to the completion point, so I can actually say all this, because at times you have to be somewhere to understand. You have to be somewhere physically to get it, And in gratitude, that was received, and now I'm able to talk about all this, because the completion happened, and I'm able to discuss everything. So it is in depth, and you definitely need to remember the first question. Second question would be, or is, in better words, followed by the first question. The first question being, as I said, why so much emphasis on stopping all that magic on this earth? All the authentic lineages and all the different types of creatures and species, and everything that has been here for so long serving the earth, Gaia, right? The great mother goddess. Why so much emphasis on burning the witches, the wizards, ending so much, right? That has then led us all to kind of become robotic and not a unique contribution to the whole. In fact, forced to kind of be made like each other, forced to be all made into something we are not, okay? Which is lacking in authentic presence and nature. Why? Why so much emphasis on that, okay? Second question. Do you all believe that our presence here is necessary? Really ask your hearts that. Is it necessary being here incarnated on this earth? Is it necessary? And if you answer to that, then ask yourself why. Whether it's no or yes, ask yourself why. Why is it necessary, or why is it not necessary, depending on what you answer to your heart. And this is a very important point, because you will come back to this one too as I go through everything in detail. Okay? So some background. Yes, being in Ontario, Canada, not my first time to Canada, but in this life definitely was my first time to the Toronto regions and surrounds. The background was and is going to heal the land, to check in, to see the circumstance and connect with, the most important demonstration of nature nearby to where we were in Toronto, which is Niagara Falls. And my beloved sister and friend was very wise to not prep me on what I would witness upon arrival. In fact, it was so wise of her that even if there was some kind of explanation, I still would have been so shocked, because literally could not even begin to process what I saw upon arrival to the region of Niagara Falls. But the lack of prepping was good, because somehow it was an organic response and necessary for someone who's never seen that, who's never seen what can happen in such important power places, okay? I say this because in Australia, for example, where I've spent a lot of time, also where I came, my feet, first started to step on this earth in this life. I mean, that part of this earth, to me, has a similar backbone because of what's happened in terms of the invasions and the destruction to the first peoples of that land and also nature there. But I can't say it's happened at the same degree yet, touch wood, as it's happened in places like Canada and the United States of America and other parts of this earth. And you have to really be there to see it. You have to be there to understand, because I have visited other places in the United States of America and Canada, I have. But I never dreamed, the most important, waterfalls that has been all over the TV, that people speak of, that people go all over this earth. They travel all the way there to witness these important waterfalls and, demonstrations of nature. I mean, I never dreamed it would be that destroyed, that abandoned, that harmed the way it was when I saw it for the first time in this life. And the background is, yes, we were driving in, and it was like going through a mini Las Vegas, massive amusement park. And this is on the Canadian side, mind you. And I hear on the Buffalo side, it's about the same, and there's just noise everywhere. It's all about entertainment, theme parks, ghost trains, horror parks, freak rooms, casinos, towering, very poorly designed, accommodations and hotels that are just popping up everywhere. And literally, there's no structure, there's no architectural class on how we're going to present everything there in the region. We're just going to build wherever we have the money to build. And that's what it felt like. And close to zero reference to everything that took place before all of this construction happened. But yes, as I was arriving, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, because the whole region going towards the Niagara Falls and that part is taken over by all sorts of factories, construction, without, again, class and design of architecture of where we're putting things. Residential areas are being destroyed because of the toxicity and the pollution. People are going to have to move out of those houses because of all of what's getting exploited nearby, how Gaia is being exploited nearby. So imagine you're arriving into this place, and you would think, because I have a reference in my mind, such as the national parks in Australia, okay, you would think there would be a massive area, protected area, that you just cannot touch, and then you arrive to the Niagara Falls. But actually, this is not what happens. You arrive, you get as close as you can to the Niagara Falls. You can park right up next to the Niagara Falls if you want. You can literally drive past, there's a promenade where your car can go and park, which is just 2 meters facing the Niagara Falls. And right behind you, there's a mini Las Vegas. There's 1,000 hotels, there's casinos. There's all the amusement and lights and distraction that you could ever possibly want and ask for. And there's nothing pointing to the essence, the beautiful magic, which is the Niagara Falls, why the ancients would go there, what would take place there prior to the conquests and all sorts of invasions. What did the First Nations do there? What did they appreciate there? Why was it such a respectful point in their geographic understanding of the land? You can't find that there. You can go around and search, and you won't find that there. You'll find strange things, such as horror stories of where people have been killed or where people have been thrown down the Niagara Falls. You can find ghost stories, again, some more horror stories of houses that are haunted and little, forts and castles that have had torture happen in them. I mean, all of that is there. You can find it. It's talked about. But to find the respectful points that enable the people that visit to have an open heart and receive the blessings from that power place of our earth, nothing is there declaring it. This doesn't mean that the rest of the world is doing that. Not at all. It's just that I haven't seen such an important place that brutally disturbed. Yes, I have. If I think of third world countries like India, there are many natural places in India that you go to and you cry because, you can't populate there because of the level of mass destruction. The same goes for places in Africa, which was a kingdom or a queendom of incredible abundance of nature. And you go to certain places, the level of destruction that's happening, exploiting the land there, you can't populate there. People are starving. People have no water to drink. So in third world countries where they have been exploited, okay, let's not begin to comment on who does this and why they do it yet, then what takes place? We have to move on to second world countries and eventually to first world countries where we can exploit our own backyards because we've exploited everything else to the maximum. You get it? So, in a first world setting, I haven't seen that level of degeneration and that level of disrespect. Like I said, in Australia, it hasn't arrived at that level. If you go to the Blue Mountains, thankfully, you still feel like there's 1,000,000 meters between you and the three sisters, which once was the seven sisters. You can see 1,000,000 meters between you both. A lot of natural heritage and open space. You can see there's still protection there to a degree. And we don't know how long this will last because let's not forget in 2020, the most important Aboriginal caves and origination points of the land, that had so much, prominence for kilometers upon kilometers in the desert that were just full of wealth and riches in terms of cultural heritage and evidence of people that habitated the land long before anybody else and just their communion with nature and respect to nature. What happened in 2020 while we were all freaking out because of lockdowns happening and pandemics worldwide? Companies like Rio Tinto were literally blasting 20 to 30 million years of history and then after apologizing. This is what takes place. We blink and people do whatever they want. I mean, look at the Amazons. It's not a lie that they are the lungs of this earth, which I've spoken very extensively on in 2020 about this. It's not a lie that they are part of our, core mechanism of air and breath of this whole earth because we're all interlinked, we're all interrelated, we all depend on each other. We are depending on every element on nature as we are influenced daily by the sky so strongly. We are also influenced by each other on this earth and the earth itself. And then we think that everything isn't interlinked. I mean, what's happening in a far, Atlantic Sea is also affecting the Pacific Ocean. Everything is bonded. The web is very intricate and it's beyond what we can just see or understand or describe because we're not, first and foremost, allowed to understand. Most things are restricting that knowledge. And also, even if we try to right now, the way things are currently, it's going to be quite a chasing our tail experience because there's just so many roadblocks and it's done on purpose. It's done on purpose so a minority can rule and dominate. And I guess who that minority is that's ruling and dominating is worth our, not feeding into and giving, our concern and energy to, but simultaneously having enough respect for ourselves and others to also see that, there's been a lot of flaw and mistakes when it comes to the evolution of Earth and the people that have dominated this Earth, that have ruled this Earth. And this is why the first point is very important and the second point, questioning, is very important. So, more on the background before I get back to this. Getting into all of that, I was shocked. I was shocked because my reference is Australia as a first reference of a first world country. And thankfully, nature and nature reserves are quite cared for, okay? But it doesn't mean that the Aboriginals have been and were cared for. No, not at all. It doesn't mean that the local law and the way to respect the earth and the land survived, the oral traditions and so on. Some did, yes, but the majority were taken out of their comforts. And where cities were built, the local people of the land were literally pooed on, pissed on, and treated as if they had no value and they were worth zilch. That's hard, isn't it? It's painful, isn't it? It's painful because the automatic result is, let's act, let's do something, let's resolve this problem. Who are those people that have caused all that suffering? We have to deal with those people. There's an instant need to act. But before any of that, somebody has to also try and see the balance here of the reality of where we are. Because in this world we're in this world we're dwelling in, everything is cyclic. This we've talked about in many things that we've discussed. And this is a truth, not coming from me, but in the truth of all. Everything is cyclic. Everything is based on its cycles. And the realm we're in, the reality we're in, it's a place that is definitely dual. Dual means dualistic, which implies positive, negative, plus and minus, yes and no, which implies night and day, which implies there is a contrast of extremes. We're not in a place that has arrived to beyond those extremes, that has actually risen to a place of complete and total freedom, which isn't bound by those extremes. We haven't arrived there yet. So in this dualistic place we're in, there are cycles. Cycles are the ages we face. Many ancient belief systems talk about these ages. And in English words, we're referring to golden ages, silver ages, bronze ages, and iron ages. And currently, we're in the iron age. And if you use the Vedic word for that, it's called Kali Yuga, which translates to the age of degeneration, destruction. Some say the word of degeneration isn't the best word to use. So if we want to work with another word, we could think of something like maybe disconnection from our authenticity, an age of disconnection from our true nature, or a lack of connection to, maybe we could just use the word the heart, because that is what's being blocked. Because the shortness of the modern world, it's a very short time frame of the modern world, the amount of damage that the modern world has done to this earth in literally a few hundred years surpasses the damage that has happened to this earth in thousands and thousands of years. So how can we be proud of that? How can we be proud of our Newtons and all of what's happened through so-called modern education and your Cambridges, your Harvards and all of that? How can we basically say that's so wonderful, that's so great, when the universities that first were here on this earth that are in recorded history, such as your Taxila universities, your Nalanda universities, universities of ancient Greece, and even all the ancient libraries, that most of them were destroyed by certain forces, malefic forces, because of the fact that there was true knowledge and wisdom stored, right? Why are all those original universities disregarded? Question number 3. Why have they been taken over by a fake West's system of hierarchy that has literally stopped and taken through theft, so much of the world's sacredness? See, why? Why didn't the first truths of this earth maintain a presence? The local law, the wisdom of nations coming from the local people and their relationship to the earth and the harmony that they had already understood. This all doesn't mean that people weren't suffering, that beings and creatures and species weren't suffering. That's why it's cyclic. The suffering is there. That's why we're aiming to be free of cyclic existence and suffering, and we want that to happen to everybody. That's the wish. Freedom is necessary. That's the aspiration. We want to go beyond what is binding us, what is keeping us in these extreme states. However, it's still crucial in order for that to be a fair aspiration, for us to understand what that means, for us to be interested. It is crucial that we are also aware of where we are right now, the circumstances we're in right now, and not be blinded by the amusement and entertainment and the constant distraction, and therefore not caring, not being concerned, not having empathy, not having a heart, not understanding, right, where we are. And this is, again, where the background story to this trip will continue to unravel. I was shocked, because all of what's built right there on the Niagara Falls doesn't support the origination of what that precious land is. If we were taught, if school buses that rock up there were taken there as a place of healing, a place of nature's power, a place of, in simple words, the elegance of the element water. If people were taken there acknowledging that, having respect, going there in veneration, respecting where they're going, wouldn't that make the world slightly a better place? Imagine we belong to a world right now where there are school buses with kids getting taken to these places, and it's all about amusement and entertainment and horror parks and, amusement parks and just everything that is so disconnected from the body which these little kids have, which is the actual body, which is a natural creation. It's not coming from a metallic source such as metal, which can create a robot. It's coming from natural sources. It's created through the elements. These kids are, in bodies that are made by 5 elements: earth, water, air, fire, space. These 5 elements are creating the bodies of these kids. The kids are ruled by these elements. It's a fact. It's not a conspiracy. And they're going to connect with the element water when they go to these Niagara Falls. However, they're totally miseducated, wrongly informed. They go there and they see a great American or Canadian landmark and make a joke about it and get entertained and amused by being in theme parks and, shooting balloons with guns to win a prize. Why? Why is that the way things are? What kind of leadership of this earth, of the rulership of this earth, would be so cruel, would be so wrong? Is it intentional? Are those minorities intentionally doing this to the masses? Why do we even bother to even think about all this, right? Well, many great sayings by great thinkers and awakened, realized ones of this earth have said, we need to work on our inner dimension and awaken and become illuminated, awakened, realized, in order for everything to awaken. And it is a true thing. It is a true thing because we go to work on our inner dimension. We're so disconnected from that. That's why even in all of what's taking place, very few start to circulate a sense of truth. It's so easy to get pulled by the never-ending reel, which is desire, wanting more, never being satisfied, wanting more, never being fulfilled, never having one's thirst quenched. It's so easy to be leaded on by that. It's such an external pull, but then the inner world just instantly gets rejected in amidst all that's happening right now. So, as I've already mentioned, there's a lot to say, and it's a very extensive discussion, but it's not easy to talk about this in a short amount of time because these are very big subjects, and I'm giving you a lot of very big contemplation points, not to confuse you, but just so that you can answer the second question in all of what has been said here. The second point, the value of you being here right now. Is it worth it? Do you think it's necessary that you're here right now? How do you answer that in your heart? Yes or no? And there's a reason for that, because if you listen to all of this and you contemplate, eventually you're going to actually probably tell yourself, you know what? Yes. It's very important that I'm here right now. It's actually so important that I'm here right now, incarnated right now, and receiving this information, because I'm going to actually give birth to meaning and purpose in my life. And we'll get to the fourth point of what that meaning and purpose is, not because, again, we have to take action on all of what is, wronged this earth, but the power of how we can change it from the inside, and coming back to, empathy and care and concern, and really opening the heart and thinking of all these children and all of these people who do go to connect with the Niagara Falls, for example, and are so restricted in that process because there isn't enough authentic information on how to approach such a place. And the circumference is built on complete and utter ruin and disrespect, that it's very difficult to be there and say, I'm in a holy place. This is nature's expression, and I should be humbled by this. This is part of me. I'm part of this. This is the water element. Let's not forget, we are more than 70% water. This earth is more than 70% water, if not 80% water. Water is a very important element. And we have that very strongly in us. It's part of us. You know, to have more than 70, 80% water in our body, just as the earth itself has more than 70 or 80% water in it. What a reflection, what a mirror. How can we not say the truth then, that we are of this earth? It's just so clear. The evidence is so clear. So anyway, we went to Niagara Falls. We did so much ceremony on the full moon in Capricorn. We saw so many families, so many people, so many gathering there, a lot appreciating what they were seeing. The few people that we were able to converse with, value that they're there. Understand that it's nature's expression and value seeing it. And they're taking photos and taking videos and being happy to be there with the Niagara Falls. But very few stop and see the problem, because it's so easily camouflaged nowadays. Because the entire construct, the entire education, the entire systematic worldwide so-called modern format is a design that has manipulated all of us. And it's difficult, very difficult, to be a part of all of it whilst not being a part of all of it at the same time. But that is a very important aim. That's why the inner work is crucial. That's why maintaining the purity of this earth is crucial. And where do you obtain that? Where do you maintain that? Through your inner journey, which is cultivation of your heart, which is your integrity, your honesty, which is making sure that you're concerned and you continue to be, even if it falls on deaf ears, even if you care for your immediate environment, everything that's around you, which is already enormous. Even if you don't see results, you're doing that. You're trying your best. You're concerned. That's all that matters. It doesn't have to be reciprocated. The more of that can be produced on this earth, the better. Then it becomes infectious, as they say. Kindness is infectious. Caring is infectious. The more we care, the more we concern ourselves. The more we're concerned. Also inwardly concerned, doing our best to inwardly understand that, well, we're not just I or me, and then being really happy about that we have a role here. Point number 2, to bring back all that magic, to bring back all that beneficial action and activity, because the why, to the first point, the question, why was it all taken away? Why was it all taken down? Why has there been so much effort in destroying the best things of this earth? And whoever did that or is doing that, why? And then our second point, why we're here, is it worth it that we're here? Of course. Many of us could say yes. Some of us might say no, because it's difficult. I can understand. But let's try and enhance the meaning by wanting it to be a yes. It's important that we're here right now, because being here right now means we can help people. We can help this earth. We can help ourselves, our hearts. We can reconnect to them, to our hearts, to the hearts of others. We can have more concern about the most important part of our being, which is the heart now. No heart function, no function, And it's an ongoing fight, because the so-called structure and system and all of it does take away meaning and value. But through our wishes, our prayers, our joy in being at places like Niagara Falls, and just praying and wishing for her to be, cared for and abundant again, and to not lose her capacity to help and replenish and support everybody from where she is, from where the Niagara Falls are. And through that also understanding, any form of communion with nature, wherever we are, is a blessing, because it's a reflection of our inner beauty, our inner territory, respecting the outer is respecting the inner, and being aware of the links. All these links will further support and further, enhance our quest here and the meaning of our time here. So we did watch the full moon rise. It was a beautiful mystical tour. We watched the full moon rise over the Niagara Falls. Her presence was very strong. There was, also a timelessness, because you can instantly tap into just everything, everything that's ever taken place. And as you receive that and connect to that information, you understand the fight of Gaia, the fight of Yi, of the great mother goddess, isn't for herself. It isn't selfish. It's for all of us. Her patience is for all of us, So that spirit, that force, that authentic technology, that authentic intelligence that we all mimic and then claim to say that we have created this and we have created that, when, the authentic version is this earth, Mother Earth, Gaia, the real statement, the real authentic capacity. She's doing it all for us. If you just be that water, which is the Niagara Falls for a moment, just completely become that, you'll understand all of what's around that's just so sickly being built and structurized and made and all that expression. It's like a sickness, But the earth isn't sick. That's the part of the story, Put ourselves where she is. Be that water. Just be that water and you'll see. Be the eyes of that water. You'll see. The earth isn't sick. It's all that's around it. It's on it that's doing all of this, right? And then everybody else who's just actually in between, kind of wanting salvation and connection, but also not being able to understand how to find it or where to obtain it. So, yes, it is heartbreaking to see what the modern world has done, how much has been lost in the name of so-called science. And when we talk about science, I'm not referring to a kind of correct conduct in science and exploration and study to obtain authenticity, but more of a concerning form of science, that suppresses the sacredness, the magic, the law of nature, divine law, in fact. And at the same time, takes its form into many kinds of religions, which also, because of the mindset of the people that dominate those religions, even that loses the magic, the capacity, the real pulse. But it's very much about the heart. And without that, without a care and concern, without a true connection to each other through a point of reference which mustn't be lost, and that's care, kindness, compassion, empathy, concern, love, true love. If not true, then what? If that gets, I guess, feared, because it is the most powerful thing, then what happens? We all just serve the self, and then we're no longer appreciating where we are and why we're here and how valuable it is to be here. And the reason behind that is to bring back this brilliance, the magic of the heart, concern, the joy. Going and hugging a tree, one tree, you'll see how happy the tree will be. Talking to a bird, being interested in the animals of this earth. Not harming, not killing, not harming and killing nature. Enjoying the expression of nature. Everything has its role. Everything has its piece. So we we get cranky because we want to say the white man, okay, has done this to the earth. I'm just giving you an example. The Europeans have done this, right? But why don't we get a bit more realistic? Even the peoples of certain localities, such as Europe, for example, and this is so key, we got to hear this. They've been fighting with each other for so long. There's been so many wars and so much problem in European territories prior to going and taking over other lands of this earth. More specifically, what about the United Kingdom? Before the monarchy, as we know it, if we think of the Arthurian tales, true or not, when we think of Excalibur, when we think of the Knights of the Round Table, when we think of mythical kings, okay, whether that is a true story or not, we can at least say what destroyed the Druids, what went and ended the Celts, the Celts, what went and tried to distort everyone's natural law and capacity with the land and the magic and the mysticism around being in nature and of nature and for nature. What was that? What came and stopped all that? I mean, it happened in the United Kingdom's backyard. We can't say that there was no magic there once upon a time, that there was no concern and empathy and love and tenderness and radiance. That's the point. What happened? What exactly? And it doesn't really have to be a big, novel of an answer. Just keep it simple. There's always going to be a minority that doesn't want the beauty, the goodness, the joy, the awakening. There's always going to be an abundance of greatness in this reality that attracts the exact opposite. We're in the dualistic place, So if there's dualism, there's going to be opposition, right? Forces of benefit, forces of malefic, negative intent. And that's where we are, everyone. So we can't exactly make it very general and generalized, because it's got nothing to do with just the white man, or it's got nothing to do with just this or just that, because there have been monstrous killers, evildoers everywhere. And this has happened literally everywhere. However, there have been peaceful times. There have been times on this earth where people did live in peace, such as during matriarchal societies once upon a time, or in a very famous matriarchal society which was known as Minoan Crete. There is no evidence of war. There is no evidence of fighting. There was only evidence of peaceful dwelling in that part of our earth. So what I'm trying to tell you is, if we look at the calendar, if we go back to the Inquisitions and so on, there was a massive force coming through Europe, getting rid of all the magic in the name of what? Potentially at that time a pope, or someone who was envious of, I guess, everyone's unique contribution to the whole and wanted to dominate. Yes, these things happen. They've happened over and over again. Emperors of China have done this. Chiefs of certain tribes have fought against other chiefs of other tribes in the First Nations of this earth. There has been issues everywhere. There has been negative intent and action everywhere. We can't just pinpoint the white man. But we must also understand that under the rulership of the modern era, which has been predominantly ruled by certain, public figures that are of very white origin, and this is not a racist statement, it's a fact, there's been enormous amounts of degeneration, ruin. What the modern world has done to nature and this earth in just a little speck of time has been more destructive than what has happened in thousands and thousands of years. So what do? Are we now going to say, oh, we're going to blame the white man? Or are we going to understand that there's an issue here, a bigger issue, a much bigger issue? And that is that we are in a cyclic dimension that is endless. And the issue isn't the earth herself. It's all of what is inhabiting it, right? Living in it. And how that spins and circulates. Yes, we are her creatures, birthed on her. However, we're not only that. We also have a unique contribution. We have our minds. So therefore, being human beings, so-called human beings, we have a choice, right? We have the ability to contemplate. We have the ability to concern ourselves. We have the ability to look at things and be very concerned about how we react. Yes, unfortunately, in recent history, the amount of damage that has been produced from countries such as the UK, the USA, and other European, peoples of power, and also so many others. But we're not going to limit it to that, because the issue is, not just one or two kind of countries nowadays. I mean, there's a lot of concern about what happens to the future of humanity and who dominates humanity. There's a lot of concern about that. There's a lot of, hidden wars regarding that. I mean, which direction is all going to go? But one thing that's evident, look at it all, regardless of who's done this and doing this. Yes, it's a very bad time. And it doesn't look like people are concerned about the heart or goodness and kindness. It's just, let's go for more destruction, greed, selfish gain, disconnection from community, disconnection from being concerned about others. Also, very amplified version of the ego identity, instead of wanting to surrender to a freeing oneself, right? And becoming more concerned and connected with the whole, and finding true teachings and teachers, and finding the magic again, and returning that beauty to this earth. There are so many films that have been made about this, actually, whether they be fictional or not. It's actually incredible that in the 80s and the 90s, and even in the 70s, there have been films made about how much has been taken down in terms of the authentic beings of this earth, and the magic of this earth taken over by a negative force, that is just wanting darkness. And when we talk about darkness here, I'm referring to no joy, no radiance, no laughter, no song, no singing. You know how many children's films have been made about this, that we're not allowed to sing, that we're not allowed to be joyful, and only misery takes over the earth, just because of a little minority that are interested in, controlling and dominating because of their own inner evil, negativity, ill intent, which ultimately always comes back to the lack of love, or being loved, or letting love happen to them, true love happen to them. These types of plots and stories and narratives that have been written over and over again in fairy tales, in TV shows, in films. It's a living thing happening right now in our reality. A lot of people are trying to be happy and continue to do their best, but there are many places that don't know how to find that anymore, that struggle, that don't have any more authenticity and access because they've been so pulled away from it and, distracted from it. So in order for this to close up with a takeaway that's wholesome enough for us to not lose hope or be disparaged or feel a lack of optimism, is to understand that, yes, point number 2, we're here, definitely here, for a worthy reason. And if we're listening to information like this, we obviously care about a better day, at the very least, for everyone, not just for ourselves. And especially for nature and authenticity that is living throughout all and within. With that intention, not being inclined to feel like, no, there's really no reason or no purpose for me being here right now, which is easy to fall into that trap around the second point of thinking that way, considering we're in the times that we're in. You know, getting it into a very confident yes. The wholesome close is, you know, and I've said this in many other talks, and again, bringing it back to that link to astrology, you know, the age of Pluto and Aquarius, the next 20 or so years, is a fantastic time for equalizing circumstances. False hierarchy will be definitely exposed, and, you know, there will be some awful totalitarians and dictator-like figures on a global platform, but even though we might all feel a lot of aversion towards them, they're going to definitely be the catalysts of exposing so much of the real shocking stuff that's taking place, and how we've been mass manipulated in so many ways, and, you know, forced into a system that is totally anti-authenticity and our respect of the inner natural world and divine nature and divine law in divine nature, and just our commitment to being of the earthly plane. So much is, in fact, getting us disconnected from the heart and from our responsibility to use that, what we have, which is the heart, okay? So there's going to be a lot of exposing to the wrong kind of hierarchy, equalizing happening where, yes, there will be revolutions. The underprivileged, you know, third world peoples, whatever's left of the indigenous world, and even, you know, authentic, you know, presences on this earth that have come as civilizations, in fact, ancient civilizations that somehow continue to stagger on until the present day. Whatever's left of that, whatever remnants are left of that, there will be revolution, because, you know, we're all going to understand that actually, you know, we've been suppressing and stopping incredible authentic technology, but then after trying to mimic it, right, certain minorities, which then further damages what could have been a much easier route, and then expect everyone to just keep the blindfold on. You know, Pluto and Aquarius won't let that happen, because Gaia is the most advanced technology you could ever dream of, and always will surpass the technology of man and what's man-made. And, you know, ancient civilizations and so much of what has been infiltrating once upon a time on this earth, and has been part of this earth and has created, you know, incredible things that we continue to study until today. It doesn't mean that doesn't exist anymore and isn't capable of re-emerging or being part of today's society yet again, but in a way that's probably, again, revolutionary and anti, again, a minority that are really doing everything they can to destroy the capacity of authenticity and actually being able to rise, to awaken, to obtain something very true. So, again, bringing this back to the truth seeker's quest, again, working with astrology and also the respect of nature. I mean, the act of caring to heal the earth and support the authentic lineages that do that hold hands and keep this earth in divine harmony, is part of the truth seeker's quest. You know, in any truth-seeking story, you're always going to meet a witch doctor, a shaman, a healer. You're always going to bump into those kind of beings that have this incredible capacity. Yogis, yoginis, anyone who basically is working with this earth's authenticity, the divine law, and we're all holding hands together, trying to create the right kind of divine harmony and bring the best, the benefit, like my lifelong teacher says, the beneficial magic. Magic is beneficial. That's why it's magic. It's for the utmost benefit. Anything that isn't beneficial isn't magic. You know, that's what he would say, and that's what he says. So that's the point. So the warmth in the closing of all this, so you can understand and also, you know, receive all the gifts of what has just been accomplished at the Niagara Falls as well, you know, is basically continuing to believe and trust in these enlightened lineages. We've all got the plus and minus within us. Let's think of evolved and ancient also chemistry. I mean, we've all got the plus and minus within us. We've all got the dualism. Our minds are dualistic, you know. We've got that, right? So how do we respond? You know, how do we connect to that dualism, knowing that it's in us? You know, we have the capacity to respond in a malefic way. We have the capacity to respond in a beneficial way. We have the capacity to aspire for greatness. We have the capacity to want self-serving, wicked agendas. It's in our hands. Even if we're at gunpoint, what's going on internally in our minds, who will know? The person holding the gun, they won't know what you're thinking, right? And even if they did, it's still your thought. It's still your intention. It's still your will. You're still capable of, outwardly saying, yeah, I agree with you, and inwardly saying, actually, I don't. Do you understand what I'm trying to tell you? The point here is it's in our hands. So with that certainty of it being in our hands, in our hearts, our capacity is very important, our unique contribution to the whole. That equates to, well, actually, we have quite a capacity. We have quite a power here, because we don't have to be enslaved. Even if we are outwardly enslaved, we don't have to be. So believing, the trust is so important in divine authenticity, awakening, realized beings of the past, of the present, of the future, awakened beings. Enlightenment, awakening, the real one, accomplishing freedom, true freedom, becoming free of, getting awakened to obtaining the truth, right? The truth of all, waking up, realizing the truth. We can all do that. Believing and trusting in that, in the true seeker's quest, in the unique contribution to the whole, in our own personal journey, and how we relate to reality, how authentically we are relating to reality, understanding and knowing ourselves, right? Going into that inner dive and understanding, knowing ourselves. That's part of the main fundamental base of the true seeker's quest. You have to know yourself, right? As the great Oracle of Delphi told Socrates, you have to know yourself. And as Gautama Siddhartha has so kindly, taught about the nature of things, nature of reality. So many truth, masters of the truth, so many wisdom lineages, so much, such an abundance of that we've had on this earth, even in recorded history that we can actually trace back. There's a lot of evidence. People have awakened. People have realized the truth. People have found their authenticity, returned to their authenticity, and therefore become free, and therefore awoken, risen. And you'll see that with saints. You'll see that with, there's so many examples. Prophets, sages, your average house dwellers, that maintain a wonderful home life with kids and wives and husbands and still accomplish the truth and realize something. Anyone can. Believing in that whilst using the wonder which is this earth. Thankfully, we have it still as a ground, to obtain that truth, to want it and believe in it. Enlightened lineages have been everywhere, have always been, will always be. Enlightenment is constant. The truth is constant. Just as the earth is okay, right? Ultimately. It's not the earth that's unwell. We are the unwell ones. All of the display that's creating all this mess here. The same goes for the truth. It's not stained. It's not disturbed. It's a matter of returning to it, to the truth, to her, to home, to our authenticity. So hearing all of this, it's great to greatly aspire and do our best, right, with whatever time we have, and fill it up with virtuous deeds and intentions, and just have the best intentions, and regardless of the results, just keep checking in on our response and how we relate. But the medicine is always going to be this, be this awareness of how we respond. And that inner dive supports and also structurizes the response, because the more clear we are within, the more connected we are, the greater accomplishment. So, we have to trust in the age of so-called awakening, which is also the age of degeneration, because they come together. The brighter the light, the deeper the darkness, the deeper the darkness, the brighter the light. The extremes couldn't be more extreme than what they are now, but at least if we want to realize something and accomplish something truthful and really, awaken and just become, something beneficial and truthful and so on and so forth. It's just so easy to do it because of the contrast in the age we're in now. And then having moments where we understand where we are, where we contemplate, and therefore our heart is touched because we care. I mean, if you see things like the destruction in nature, right, you feel something in your heart, right? That's a wonderful thing. And then cultivating what you're feeling by being concerned, by praying and wishing that this doesn't continue, that, only good can come from a good heart, right? A good heart, an authentic heart, a sincere heart, a caring heart. So that's where we're at. And it's super easy, I think, in this day and age to have even a really loud and direct experience of that, of what happens when the heart is touched and changed and shook up and moved, and so it's a powerful time, everyone. I do feel Pluto in Aquarius is very helpful because the right revolutions will start to form. Technology will debate with true technology and advanced futuristic civilizations that have already been here. How they re-emerge will always wipe out indolence and anything that is basically lower in terms of its capacity. And that's scary, but that's what happens because, then we have to, again, reassure ourselves of the authenticity. So it's always tricky when it's a truthful era or epoch, because you see everything out there just shockingly. You're not picking grapes from the vines and having someone pour you divine elixirs while someone is stringing a harp. I mean, we can create that setting, but it's not an everyday experience, right? So, yeah, it's an interesting time, but I'm very grateful for this recent mystical tour, deeply dedicating it to all this universe and its healing. And, these tours are happening all the time, but I rarely talk about them publicly. And this one was very dear to me because of beloved Daria and her family, and just to get that chance, because it's just the timing, it's incredible, just to be somewhere. And the moment it strikes you and it all comes together and you feel a completion point because you've seen the whole circle and it seals, you can really walk away and say, okay. So thank you, everyone. And may all be auspicious. Bye.